I'm very delighted to introduce Honorable Irwin Cotler. As you know, he was the former Minister of Justice in Canada. The work that he has done in the Canadian Parliament to recognize the massacre in 1988 as a crime against humanity is unforgettable by the Iranian people and by all the victims of human rights abuses. I would say not only in Iran, but everywhere around the globe. I'm very glad that he was able to join us here and say a few words. I know he is very much pressed for time because of personal issues and other things, and that's why we really appreciate his presence here even more than any normal way. Thank you so much, Mr. Cotler, for coming.
I'm really here, to thank Sir Ahmed, to thank you for really being and standing on guard for freedom and for liberty and for democracy in Iran and for solidarity with the people of Iran. Because when we come together, this is a pro-Iranian demonstration. It's on behalf of the people of Iran who have been the targets of Khamenei's oppression. And so we come here today in common cause and solidarity with the people of Iran. And we meet, as you know better than I, or better than anyone, we meet at an important moment of remembrance and reminder, of bearing witness and of the need to take action. We meet at this point on the 28th anniversary of the mass murder, because that's what it was, of the mass murder of some 30,000 Iranian political prisoners in the summer of 1988. In effect, what was a crime against humanity. And so, along with my colleagues in the Canadian Parliament at the time, we co-sponsored a resolution, and I'll just read you the excerpt of that resolution, that this House condemns the mass murder of political prisoners in the summer of 1988 as a crime against humanity, honors the memory of the victims buried in the mass graves at Kavaran Cemetery and other locations in Iran, and establishes September 1st as a day of solidarity with political prisoners in Iran. I'm delighted that the Canadian Parliament, in passing this resolution, meant that we became the first country in the world to unanimously and unequivocally remember and condemn what happened in Iran as a crime against humanity. And as it happens, we meet in the wake of, because it was just a few days ago, of the publication of the audio video of the Ayatollah Montazeri, providing further corroborative evidence, if any was needed, not only about the mass murders and the horror of the execution, but also implicating the leaders of Iran, some of whom are in power even today as we meet in that execution. When the Ayatollah Montazeri addressed the death committee at the time responsible for those executions, one of the members of that death committee was Mustafa Pourmohammadi, now the Minister of Justice in Iran. So somebody who should be in an Iranian prison is actually the Minister of Justice presiding over more executions in Iran. Because we meet also in the same month, where on August 2nd of this month, some 25 Sunni Muslims were executed in one day by the same people involved in the death committee in 1988. And so when I say we are here to remember and to be reminded, when I say we are here to bear witness and we are here to take action, And I want to close with some recommendations for action that must be taken immediately by the Canadian people in concert with the international community. The first thing that must be realized is that the mass murder that took place in 1988 was no less than a crime against humanity, as the Canadian Parliament itself declared. There is no statute of limitations for crimes against humanity. Those who committed the crimes then are still accountable and must be held accountable today. And so we call on the Canadian government. We call on the Canadian government to join with the international community to refer these crimes against humanity to international bodies like the UN Security Council, and to ensure that an international tribunal of inquiry is set up, as was set up with regard to the killings in Rwanda, as was set up with regard to the killings in former Yugoslavia, is set up to hold these mass murderers accountable. The second thing is, we call upon the Iranian government to cease and desist from its continuing executions. I mentioned the 25 murdered at the beginning of this month, but let us not forget that Iran executes more people per capita than any other country in the world. That in the year 2015, under the moderate, as he is sometimes called, Rouhani, Iran executed more than 1,000 people. That was a larger sum than in the previous 25 years. And then again, those are the ones we know about. We don't know about all the others that are being executed that we don't hear about. And so, again, number two, Canada must call upon the international community to join together to stop, as you have it here in your signs, to stop the executions now. A third thing that must be done, and that is, we must call upon the Iranian regime to free all political prisoners, because those political prisoners, and I know many here in this audience have relatives who are political prisoners. I know when I was last in Paris and visited with the families of the political prisoners, they are also on the risk of execution. And those who are executed, we may never know or hear about. Just as we are finding recently the arrest, yet again, of another dual Canadian-Iranian national, Hoda Hifar. The same that when they also arrested over 8 years ago, Saeed Malakpour, who then was a permanent resident of Canada, on the way to becoming a Canadian citizen. He went back to Canada, to Iran, to visit ill people in his family, and he was arrested, charged with the usual trumped up charges, tortured, and 8 years later is still in prison. And so we call on Canada that if you are going to renew diplomatic relations with Iran, as you've said, you must make the renewing of diplomatic relations conditional on bringing the mass murderers to justice, conditional on freeing the political prisoners in Iran, and on putting an end to the wanton executions in Iran. And finally, we call on Iran to put an end to its persistent and pervasive assault on the rights of women, on its persistent and pervasive assaults on the rights of minorities, be they religious minorities like the Baha'i, be they ethnic minorities, to put an end also to its criminalization of freedoms protected under the Iranian constitution, whether it be freedom of religion, or freedom of speech, or freedom of assembly, or freedom of association, to put an end to the imprisoning of brave human rights defenders in Iran who are standing up for these political prisoners, to put an end to the arrest of brave lawyers in Iran who are standing in solidarity with these political prisoners, and to put an end not only to the continuing arrest of all the leaders in civil society in Iran. And I'm reminded also of the Ayatollah Bourjedi, who did nothing else but call for freedom of religion in Iran, who stood up on behalf of other religious minorities and ended up being put in prison, tortured in prison for 11 years now, for doing nothing else but asking for the protection of freedoms guaranteed under the Iranian constitution and Iranian law. And so I say, I end with how I began, that we are here to stand in solidarity with the Iranian people, that we are here to stand in solidarity with political prisoners in Iran, put in prison by those who themselves should be held accountable and standing trial for their crimes. That we are here to call on the Canadian government to join with the international community to stop the executions in Iran, to put an end to the imprisonment of political prisoners, to put an end to the culture of impunity, to bring the perpetrators to justice, and so that we can, together with the Iranian people, go down the path to celebrate what all the Iranian people want and what we want together with them. And that is freedom, liberty, democracy, protection of human rights, and to allow the Iranian people to give expression to the great Iranian civilization and its Iranian values, which regrettably are under assault. But if we free the Iranian people, then we will have those values freed as well, along with the political prisoners and the like. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cotler. We cannot say enough from the work that you have done in the Parliament and the work that you continue to do. And this is the problem.